All right, Nick, let's talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. We've done numerous stories this whole offseason just about how good Alabama has done. And finally, the national media, they've kind of pivoted from the downfall of Alabama and started pivoting towards Coach DeBoer's done a pretty good job. And we have an article highlighting just that kind of the overview of this, recruiting class and just how everything has been so far. Let's get into the article and we can talk more about how great Coach DeBoer is on the other side. This, of course, is from over on Sporting News. It says Kalen DeBoer is a recruiting magician. That is 100% true. It says the Alabama Crimson Tide transfer portal exodus and 2025 college recruiting class were in disarray when Nick Saban retired. During DeBoer's tenure with the Washington Huskies, the first-year Alabama head coach never had better than a 28th ranked recruiting class during his short tenure in the Pacific Northwest. After some major bumps in the road early, most notably losing star wide receiver Isaiah Bond to Texas and do-it-all safety Caleb Downs to Ohio State, who AL.com's Nick Alvarez called one of the best freshmen in Alabama history, DeBoer has not only righted the ship, he now is a top 3 2025 recruiting class in ESPN's latest rankings. And if you go by 24/7 Sports composite rankings, it's top 2. DeBoer and his staff have 12 commitments from ESPN Top 300, led by Elite 11 MVP 4-star quarterback Keelan Russell and 4-star linebacker Daryl Johnson. Nick, this article really just kind of states it all. He's done such a great job. He's turned it around and done probably as good, I would say, as Nick Saban could do of saving a class, coming into a situation like such and really doing so well. So I think hats off to Coach DeBoer. I'm curious what your thoughts on this one are, but Alabama fans, in the comment section below, is this the greatest recruiting, job we've seen by Alabama head coach in recent memory? Now, I know Coach Saban, he's had some top tier classes, but you got to remember the hurdles that Coach DeBoer has come up against this offseason. Is this the greatest recruiting job we've seen in an offseason by an Alabama head coach, or is there a better one? Let us know in the comment section below. But Nick, what are your thoughts on what Coach DeBoer has done so far?
Look, we've talked about it a lot this offseason as he's battled through the issues. As of course, we're living in a transfer portal world. We're living in a very weird world with NIL where it's a lot harder to maintain and secure recruiting classes, keeping those guys as recruits, and of course, keeping them, as they graduate or go through the ranks on your program, whether they're freshman, sophomore, junior, and so on. It's a different environment. It's a much tougher environment than it was during the early years of the Nick Saban dynasty as he was building the Alabama program. That's why my answer to your question is yes, this is the most impressive recruiting job that I've seen, not just at Alabama, but out of any head coach in probably the last 2 decades. With all the negative energy and publicity right out the gate, with having one of maybe the greatest coach in college football history retiring, having a lot of transfers, a lot of recruits decommit, I was going to sit there and say, look, this is going to be a tough class. 2024 is going to be tough. 2025 in terms of recruiting is going to be tough. A few years later, he'll be able to turn it around, but it's going to be an ugly couple of years. And boy, did Kalen DeBoer prove me and prove everybody else wrong. This is a top 3 class in 2025. It's one thing to do well in 2024 just because you already had a lot of kids commit. A lot of people maybe don't want to change their mind, but obviously 2025 is still a year out, right? So there would be a lot of time for kids that maybe had been committed or interested in Alabama to look other directions, but Kalen DeBoer lost almost none of that. And anybody he did lose, he picked them up and replaced them with potentially just as good, if not better prospects. So not only is this the number 3 class in 2025, it's the number 4 class in terms of quality of average prospect, according to 24/7 Sports. That means DeBoer just isn't getting a bunch of guys. He's not just throwing a bunch of bodies at it, cranking up his rankings. He's getting a lot of quality players as well. And again, that just speaks to what a job DeBoer and his staff has done at Tuscaloosa already. And you brought it up. This is another crazy point that people are forgetting. DeBoer at Washington was always known as the guy who outcoached the talent of his recruiting, right? He'd bring in maybe a top 30 class every now and then, but this was not an elite recruiting program DeBoer had at Washington. And they were obviously really good. Last year, they made it to the college football playoff national championship game, for example. He was always known as the guy who outcoached and outdeveloped players beyond their recruiting class rankings. Well, if he does that at Alabama, they're already going to be back to winning national titles because they still have a top 4 class, top 3 class, depending on how you look at it. And this is just what's been so unbelievable about DeBoer. If he can continue that trend of outperforming his recruiting class rankings while also keeping top 3 and top 4 classes, folks, this Alabama program, I mean, there's going to be no drop off. They're going to be back in top 5, top 6, top 4 college football playoff semifinals, just like they were with Nick Saban. This has been an incredible offseason for Kalen DeBoer. And I think if you're a Tide fan, as anxious as you probably were moving on from Nick Saban and seeing what Kalen DeBoer could do, you got to feel really good about where you sit today.
Yeah, Nick, and you just look at what he's done. I think that the big ones we see is Alabama for this 2025 class. They lose a really highly touted quarterback in Julian Sayant. Then they go flip Keelan Russell from SMU. I think that's great news. Then I think this year as well, I'm just going to talk about this offseason as a whole, whether they're 2024, 2025, or transfer. Not really what I'm trying to get at. That's beside the point. But you look at Caden Proctor, who flips from Alabama, a probably as big as they get recruit, 5-star guy, one of the most highly touted guys coming out of this Alabama class, goes to Iowa. While he's at Iowa, that's maybe Alabama's not so bad. Flips back to Alabama, and now he's staying at Alabama as well. I think that was a really impressive move by Coach DeBoer as well. You talk about, losing Isaiah Bond at the wide receiver position. I think that's really great because they get some better wide receivers in as well. Then, obviously, losing the safety Caleb Downs. They come out in this recruiting class, already have 2 really great DBs as well. Derek Smith, the 4-star out of Selma, Alabama, local guy. Love that as well. I just think Coach DeBoer has met every obstacle with an answer, and you don't really see that too often. When a coach or people in general in life are fed obstacles, sometimes you just can't get over them. But Coach DeBoer seems to be the guy that whenever you present him with a problem, whatever you present him with something that he has to work through, he always seems to have the answer. And that's how you get a program back on top, and that's how you win national championships. So I think he's headed in the right direction, and I think it might be a whole lot sooner than we think to see Alabama as that national powerhouse once again.